Welcome to Athlon U. My name is Braden Gall. Follow me on the internet at Braden Gall.
And I'm Stephen Lassen. You can also follow me on the internet at all of the social media sites and also check out all my work at athlonsports.com.
Coming up on the show today, a coordinator draft, the most interesting new coordinators, offensive and defensive, in college football. We're going to go back and forth and break down some of the most interesting names that have been hired at those positions across college football. The House settlement, Stephen Lassen, oh my gosh, get excited. The House settlement has finally been approved by a judge. So we'll get into that. I think the most interesting part of all of this is that we basically have a college football commissioner now. I will explain. And I think that there's one rule. There is one rule for the new commissioner of college football. And I'll explain and get your thoughts on that coming up in just a minute. Couple of injuries as well, big-time injuries in the Big Ten that could have an impact on the race for the championship and playoff spots. So lots of stuff to get to. If you're watching on YouTube, please thumbs up, turn on the notifications, like and subscribe, all that great stuff. You'll see a flustered and sweaty hot me. But Stephen, it's a blessing though, because I was on a practice field watching football players do football things at Titans minicamp less than 20 minutes ago. And even though it was hot and even though I'm a little flustered, it was super fun to watch people do football things on a football field.
I'm always about football stuff. At this point of the off season, we've had the magazines out at the press. Everybody's like looking forward to media days, and we got the video game coming out, but it's good to have some actual football. No offense to our friends at the USFL. And of course I love the CFL, but it's nice to see football things going on. It means the season is not too far away, right?
The first half of NFL minicamp, each practice, is basically like the USFL or XFL of football practices. It is largely worthless. It's a lot of stretching and individual drills. It didn't get fun until team showed up, and then it's Cam Ward versus Jeffrey Simmons, and I'm like, oh, this is fun. And they're squirting water bottles at each other. It was great.
So how's Cam Ward looking for all of our college friends from Miami out there?
He is the evidence of the differences between Will Levis and Cam Ward was not greatly exaggerated. It was exactly spot on. Cam Ward, accuracy and processing off the charts. Will Levis, massive arm, of course. I've covered him the last 2 years with the Titans. Doesn't do the accuracy and processing thing. So that's what you see at practice. You see a ball that's not quite as thrown as hard as Will Levis, but it gets to the right spot a little faster because he's better at accuracy and processing. So I think he's overly confident. Him and Jeffrey Simmons got into it, and Jeffrey Simmons is like, one of the best, not in a bad way, like in a good, like healthy way. The confidence on Cam Ward's off the charts, but it's like in a quiet sort of like, here's a college, it's like a Ryan Williams confidence.
I like that reference. Yeah.
Ryan Williams is like a super savvy internet. Like he understands that being a star athlete, there's a star in there, like you got to perform. And I think Cam Ward gets that. I think Ryan Williams gets that. And that's sort of like certain athletes know that it's more than just athletic production that makes you a star, right? Ryan Williams out there doing podcasts and stuff,
talking about
taking shots at Vandy.
Right. I mean, who would have thought like at the start of last season, we'd be sitting here in June talking about Alabama. Of course, I think a lot of people thought Ryan Williams would have a good year, but to say he was taking shots at Vanderbilt and I guess to some extent Diego Pavia after that upset, still one of the craziest upsets of last season.
Bama overly focused on Vanderbilt? ?
Yeah.
All right. Anyway,
who would have thought?
So I'll try to get through the weeds here on this stuff. Okay. So the judge approved it last Friday that the House settlement is, of course, it's finally been approved. They had to work through a couple of details, sunsetting some stuff around walk-ons and some other things. It's the first time in history that the universities will be able to pay athletes directly. $2.8 billion worth of back damages will be paid over a 10-year period of time based on athletes since 2016. God, I'd hate to be someone who graduated in 2015. That'd be bad. It's $20.5 million per year you can pay your athletes. I've talked to a few folks around most conferences, and it seems like anybody in the group that you think, the ones that have the budget, this almost doesn't do anything but just increase the cost of doing business. Almost everybody in the SEC and the Big Ten will probably max out at $20.5 million. And all that does is move all of the NIL spending up $20.5 million. It doesn't really change a whole lot of anything, Lasso. So I don't know, now that it's official, do you feel anything differently about this revenue sharing model? They still desperately want to be employees. Potentially, some student athletes do. The universities desperately do not want them to be, because that affects tax status, and so they're still looking for an antitrust exemption from the government. Good luck with that. Where are you on all this? Celebratory? Are you excited? Are you happy that it's done? Is it good? It's good for the athletes, clearly, right?
I am thrilled that this thing passed and we can move on, because my goodness, we've been talking about this for I don't know how long. It feels like 10,000 years at this point. I think, to go back and to be completely serious here, I think when this started in the process of finalizing the settlement, I think there was a lot of optimism that once this passed, you would see maybe some calm in the system, that all of these issues would be figured out. I don't think that's the case. I still think there's a lot of chaos in the system and still a lot of unknowns. There's still a lot of lawyers that are looking through the settlement to find ways to sue again. But I think maybe the right way to approach this is, it's kind of an important moment in college football and sports to acknowledge that, programs are going to share revenue with players, rightfully so. I mean, they deserve a chunk of this. But at the same time, it also feels like, instead of just going down the same road that we've been going, where they've been reluctant to change, they've sort of been dragged into all these changes, it kind of feels like now, hey, it's a little bit of a fresh start. And so they're acknowledging these problems. They're going down the road of settling this. The revenue is going to be shared with the players. I'm not saying it's going to acknowledge everything, but I think it's a pretty big moment. Maybe it gets kind of college football where it needs to be. It's the first step in that direction. So doesn't solve everything, but I think it's a good start.
I think when you package revenue sharing sort of symbolically, which is, again, great for the players, symbolically, with the fact that the College Sports Commission, the CSC, as we're going to call it from now on, has a commissioner and will be in charge of largely enforcement, sort of what the NCAA used to do. I think when you package all of that together, it is clearly heading down the path you and I have been talking about for a long time, and it is historic. It does not necessarily change anything that happens on Saturdays, which has sort of been the thing we've said all along. I just think it's, from a financial standpoint on this, I just think it's business as usual. Like, if a player's going to get X number from one school and Y number from another school, 1 million from Alabama and 1.2 from Ohio State, that's just going to be on top of whatever the revenue sharing agreement is. It's not the recruiting. It just moves everything up. It's just business as usual, it feels like. Now, it will trim the sails on the number of teams that can compete in that ballpark. And I'm curious. I can't imagine a lot of teams that are like, yeah, I could pay 5 million, but not like 20. You know what I mean? Like, I that seems odd to me. Unless, of course, there's like a MAC team or somebody that just wants to pay, like, I'm going to pay 3 million and no one else is paying anything. And so all I need to do is invest a little bit of money, and therefore I can have the best roster in the MAC. I could see that being of value for somebody. But at the high levels, national championship levels, I don't know if this changes a whole lot of anything.
I don't think it does.
Yeah.
I would, I think the anticipation is most power conference teams are going to opt into this, correct?
Yeah.
So I think the interesting thing to me is, like, what group of 5 teams would be able to do this? And I think you've seen the American a couple months ago, kind of, I think, come with some kind of agreement that they would all invest a certain chunk of change into their programs over the next couple of years for this kind of settlement. So I think that's the interesting thing to me is, like you said, MAC schools, Sun Belt schools, Pac-12. Which one of those smaller teams, and what's the divide as well? Like, are there teams within conferences that are doing this or not? I also think worth noting on the CSC, as we're calling it, that, I think the question with this is going to be, I think, legally, how are they going to be able to, could this be challenged? Also, with these deals, they're talking like fair market, and if it's over $600, it has to be approved. That seems like a bit of a cluster to some extent. So I am curious to see how that actually plays out and how these deals are approved. And if they're not, what's like the arbitration process in sorting those out. The good news with that, though, to your point, there is like some structure around rules. They are also really emphasizing that, hey, these things need to be done in a expedited manner and not dragging out for 2 years like we've seen NCAA investigations in the past.
I've got a lot of thoughts on the CSC. I think it's going to be very interesting to see where the lines of power end up, and I think that's what's going to be interesting. And we'll get to that in a second. But I saw this other headline too about EA Sports potentially tying athlete payouts to the usage in the game, which I find to be utterly fascinating. Because in theory, a bunch of people could just all like, and I could see college football like media groups, like I'm thinking of one in particular that's just like, hey, let's get everybody at Troy paid. Let's make them the best G5 program, or whatever. Pick a school, UTSA, or whatever. Georgia Southern may be a better option here.
I'm
If you
gonna
know a group,
I'm
if you know
loading up on Eastern Michigan this year. So
if you know what group of people I'm talking about, Georgia Southern
yes,
is one of them.
yes.
I could see them like turning their entire audience and turning their entire thing into like, everybody go play as Georgia Southern for 3 seasons, and all of a sudden Georgia Southern players are all paid out at a much higher rate, and therefore you can help recruit to Georgia Southern. I am fascinated by how fans could dictate by video game usage who gets paid more money. I just find that to be fantastically interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's another, I don't know, it's a very college football thing, right? Like a bunch of people could band together and drive up the plays and streams of Akron and UMass and all those. So yeah, I'll probably be in there. Maybe I might play as like Kent State a handful of times to help our number 136 team this year.
That wouldn't be very fun. That wouldn't be very
I,
fun.
I I could build I could be the Nick Saban of the video game dynasty if I could turn Kent State into a national power.
He's sitting right there. Kent State alum. All right, so I thought that was super interesting. It's like, oh man, if I just played with, I'm just trying to think of like a quarterback, and I just played with Dan Lefevre is the guy I go to all the time. It's like, I'm just gonna play with Dan Lefevre forever, and it's like all of a sudden Central Michigan players are getting paid, and they're like, what's happening? They're like, 50 people in Nashville are just loving Central Michigan's offense right now. I just think that's hilarious. It sounds ridiculous, but also very interesting to me. Let's go to the CSC thing. This is fascinating to me because what happens in life and in business, especially when there's big dollars at stake, is sometimes you find this one little thing that allows an organization to gain power. And in this case, as it pertains to a lot of the contracts that these players are going to sign, whether it's revenue sharing or NIL or portal, or even just like Najee Kennedy, who just like took $1 million to change schools. What I find interesting is if this CSC, and Bryan Seeley, of course, is going to be he's the executive vice president of legal and operations for Major League Baseball. He is going to be the commissioner, I suppose. I don't know what you call it, of this particular organization. He has a lot of investigative experience in both the sports world, Major League Baseball, and in the private landscape as well. And so I started sending some messages about like, all right, well, what kind? Because like you see a lot of stories around baseball, especially around domestic violence or around PED usage. Like baseball seems to catch people, if that makes sense. Now, compliance. This is why this is so interesting to me. Compliance has always been sort of in the eye of the beholder. And if you've got a really strict compliance department, you end up with probably finding more stuff about your organization. If you've got a compliance department that's a little bit more part of the state-run propaganda machine of, making sure the football team gets what it needs to win, sometimes it's not going to catch stuff. And we've seen a lot of universities over the years look the other way on a lot of stuff that they should not have, just straight up. So here's my first thought. Should we have an opinion about how strict the compliance department is in terms of what this role is going to be, College Sports Commission, in terms of investigating? Because if they are allowed to investigate whatever they want and have sort of carte blanche to do what they need, it could become the de facto, like he could become the commissioner of the sport. Because if compliance had ultimate power, not like the NCAA had, but like truly the way Major League Baseball or the NFL can do, that organization would quickly gain all kinds of power in the sport, because you can make or break the health of an organization in a matter of a decision. And so I started thinking, like, do we need to have a very strict compliance department? Do we want to have a fairly lax one? And my thought was, after I went through this whole process, and here's where I landed. I don't care. I don't care if everybody cheats, because that reminds me of old college football, and it's kind of interesting. I don't care if everybody gets busted and we've got a super tight ship, because that's probably better for the sport and probably better for everybody, that everyone follows the rules, right? I see both sides of it. I actually don't care. What I care about is consistency. I need this person in this organization to behave consistently with everyone. Big Ten, SEC, small school, big school. They've got to be consistent. And if they are that, I could see this group gaining a lot of power in college football over the next few years.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept, and also it's my understanding that Seeley basically will report to a board, which is basically the conference commissioners. So the conference commissioners kind of have like de facto control over all this. Also, to your point on compliance, I think one of the things we saw coming out of SEC media days, or sorry, SEC meetings, was everybody agreeing to follow the rules and that they wouldn't sue this, because we've seen this as a problem with the NCAA, that schools make the rules, then they sue the NCAA because they don't like their own rules that they made. So I think in that regard, there could be some optimism that everybody's on the same page, everybody's following the rules. Now, I'm sure everybody's searching through the text to find the gray areas and they're going to take advantage of them. So to answer your question, um, consistency. Also, I think speed is important too. Like I mentioned, I don't think we should wait 3 years to find out something that happened and litigate it. So I'm all aboard and all about those two things. I do think it would almost be easier for them to start with a little bit of a stricter approach and going after things, and then as time goes on, I think you could maybe loosen up a little bit, and as you kind of everybody is in compliance with this. So I don't know. It's interesting that the conference commissioners, this is how they set it up. And I think with the control, they're going to kind of dictate how tough or how lax eventually this thing gets.
Brian Seeley's going to catch all the heat, a la Roger Goodell.
Yeah.
While the owners, and in this analogy, the 4 conference commissioners are the 32 owners in the NFL, get to do whatever they want. And that's the way the sport's been set up. And so I'm curious, it sounds like you lean towards, like, what's best for the sport is probably going to be a little bit more of a tighter ship to where we think that everyone's playing by the same rules. I also see the other side of it, which is, again, folks being creative and doing really silly nonsense over the last few decades is kind of the charm of college football, being like a wonky, goofy, passion-driven sport where people don't think rationally and act insanely all the time. I could see both sides of it. I just want it to be the same, and that's always been the NCAA's problem. They had no transparency. They moved too slowly, to your point, and totally lacked consistency from school to school, from situation to situation. And so if a singular body can truly enforce contracts and maybe some other stuff that's on their plate, I don't know if behavioral stuff's going to be on their plate. I assume if there's like drug testing, that could be handled by a catch-all clearinghouse as well. So you could put stuff in their purview, but the more you put in their purview, the more power they will gain. And it does feel like this is the first front office of college football to me, because compliance that's it. They could just say you're not going to the playoff next year and you're done.
Yeah.
That's ultimate power.
I think the penalty structure is what's in, kind of fascinating in all this. Like, we have to get the specific details, but some of the things of, you could lose, portions of revenue sharing or however it's going to work. In kind of the big picture, though, I do think we've been wanting rules and some consistency across the sport. This is not going to solve everything, but one of the common things you see, and I've said it on this show many times, is, transfer rules are changing by the day. Roster rules, they're changing just up until Friday and trying to figure out what's going on. So I think actually having those guardrails, to use a bad term that's been used a lot, or structure, is good for college football. It's not going to solve everything, but it feels like, hey, we've been clamoring that there's all this chaos, and now we have some structure, and now let's see it in action. And I think that's what I'm going to be paying attention to, is some of the granular details of this, how revenue sharing is going to work, what happens next. I hate to inform you, Braden, but there's a new congressional action, apparently. There's another bill potentially that could be introduced this week. So I know you have a ton of confidence in this getting done, but if you wanted to be Mr. Optimistic here, you pair this with some congressional action, and maybe you could actually see college football have some structure and calm to the chaos.
What? Congress doesn't have anything to do? That seems wrong. Um, I again, I maybe it's me getting older and being like a parent where I'm just like setting expectations for your kids is so important. Like my 7 and 8 year old need to know what the expectations are for them in our home very clearly and consistently. It benefits everybody. And therefore when like they know what is expected of them. When that doesn't happen, there are X, Y, and Z consequences of varying degrees. I know that I can't get upset if they've reached those you know what I'm saying? Like it just helps everybody. And so while I do love the old school like chaos of the Wild Wild West, which a lot of people are saying is now, but I would also say it was like every era. The 70s and 80s, total chaos. 90s and 2000s, total chaos. It's all just a little different. This time it's portal chaos and NIL chaos and there's other kinds of chaos, lawsuits and all kinds of stuff. So I
You
do.
know what the next chaos is going to be too. That's going to be conference realignment in the 2030s.
Oh, yeah, baby.
Hey,
Give me some of that.
I
Inject it right into my veins.
let me steer this back to the conversation here. Is this? I saw a story on the Athletic asking if this is the return of the bag man now in college football.
Why would it be the return? It never went anywhere.
Well, I that's a good point, but I'm just,
Literally,
yeah.
like, is it a McDonald's bag or is it like a Louis Vuitton bag? You know?
Let's see what Jeremy Pruitt's up to these days.
I just like. I guess I would probably lean towards no. Let's like make sure everyone's playing by the same rules, because that does make the championship feel cleaner and clearer and more accurate and integrity is niche. I get it. It's a niche. It's a niche product these days. Integrity, but integrity. And so I think that I would prefer that if I had to vote, but ultimately I don't care as long as you're consistent. As long as you're consistent with how you manage, investigate, because even investigations, this happens on campuses where if a compliance department at so-and-so school got some word of some stuff going on, but the team's really good. Well, we're going to drag our feet on that a little bit. And then you get some other guy who's just like gung-ho for the rules, and he's running another school's compliance department. He's like, no, that was illegal. Too much cream cheese on the bagel. Violation. That's a violation. That's a violation. That's a violation. Like, that's the problem, is that it's kind of based up to the person running the investigation as to what comes out of the investigation. And so I just want it to be consistent across all schools and all conferences. And as long as that's the case, then I think this will be successful. The question is, how much power does that group get? And once they get the power to take a team out of money, take a team out of the postseason, take scholarships away, whatever it might be, once that organization has that power, they are not going to give it up.
Yeah.
It will be the CSC. It might have a new name. It might have a new leader, but that is the group that is going to gain power and continue and eventually be the front office. That's my thinking on this.
I think that is a pretty spot on assessment of where this could go. To me, it does feel like a first step of the NCAA is still going to handle like eligibility stuff, but it also, if you really want to think down the road, and I know we don't wish for this, but like some sort of like breakaway and, 6
going to happen.
teams and like this organization that's already started to be the rule investigative body. I think Bryan Seeley is going to build out and hire some people for that investigative stuff. And like, this is like the first step towards all that. So like I said, I hope it doesn't happen, but I hope that this does bring some structure to the rules. Like you said, they're fair. They hold everybody to account. We get those investigations done in a timely manner, but also still in the background of all this, we're still trying to figure out how this is all going to work, because like I said, I know you can check Twitter because that's where all the lawyers are these days, and they are itching to sue again over all this and the $600 rules around reporting.
And they will.
Yeah.
They will. But again, like, I know that we don't want it to be pro football or pro sports, but think about how many problems are avoided because every contract is public information. Every negotiation happens at the same time between the same parties, around the same scales and the same rules and the same regulations, and that everyone knows when the contract is up, how much it's for, when you can be cut, when the buyout is. Like, everyone knows everything about all the details, and it's all on the up and up, and therefore everything is actually very simple in the NFL. Now, that's a group of employees that have unionized and have negotiated collectively to get that agreement. So you got to figure that out. But I'm like, man, it eliminates so many problems to just know that. And this is where I'm torn because part of me enjoys like, oh, Quidshot Junkins, what was he asking for in the middle of a game 2 years ago? And now he's at Ohio State getting X amount. It's like, that is funny. That's interesting stuff. It's interesting stories. It's drama. It's intrigue. It's salacious. It's entertainment. But also, the Nico thing doesn't happen if there's just regular old contracts and regular periods of renegotiation and regular windows of buyouts and regular windows of all the stuff that you get from a players association. Now, can they do that and have it all be uniform if it's not collectively bargained? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. That one I can't tell. Can you give them tax exempt status or antitrust status and have them not be employees and still have like all these rules and salary? Like the only way you get a salary cap is because it's been bargained by the employee.
I do think you have seen more, to your point, administrators start to say the only way to solve all these issues is through collective bargaining. Now, how that looks like, how we get there legally, all these ramifications, I don't know. But I do think that the train is building some momentum here to be the next step potentially in all of this. But like I said, your buddies in Congress get their act together. They pass it through the they pass it through the House. Looks like it's going to be introduced in the House this week, so we'll see.
My friends are only in the state legislative body. Okay, I don't have anybody in the national body. I don't have any sources in Congress just yet. I'm working on it. Hey, I had a meeting with John Rose the other day.
Hey.
But he's running for governor. That's why he wanted to talk. No, it's all about consistency for me. So we'll see. We'll see. But this isn't done yet. But I don't know. This is the first time, Stephen, where it felt like the first step for an actual front office being formed. This feels like a front office. And I don't know if it has the same name, same leadership, same structure, but this feels like this building and this group of people and this infrastructure that is going to come out of the CSC. It feels like that is going to be the first of what will eventually be a front office for the new league. And so there you go. Here we are. We're getting there step by step, real close, real slow. All right, you want to talk actual football?
Yeah, let's do it.
Couple of injuries here. Oregon's Evan Stewart, potentially an All-American, likely out for the year. Here's the interesting thing, and this hit me thinking through like the combine process, the draft, and the Senior Bowl. Like Josh Connerly was a standout. Terrence Ferguson was a standout. Tez Johnson was a standout. James was a standout. Dillon Gabriel, pretty good. That's like 7 bona fide NFL starters now that are either, in Stewart's case, injured or gone off the offense. I know there's a lot of hype around Oregon. I know there's a lot of trust on this offense. But if they lose a few more pieces on that offense, I already think that they're like 8 or 9 out of like the top 8 or 9 teams. I don't know if they can afford. I just don't think you can go back to being the best team in the history of your organization and continue to lose star power bodies off the offense.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is another kind of notch in the list of questions for Oregon this year. Starts at quarterback, obviously, with Dante Moore taking over for Dillon Gabriel. I think they're going to be fine at running back with Mekhi Hughes transferring in from Tulane. But just like in the bigger picture now, you take away Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, Evan Stewart's gone. They have guys, but they are younger. DeCorian Moore, the 5-star freshman, was drawing rave reviews all offseason. So I don't necessarily think that they're hurting for talent. When you also look at their schedule, they might be favored in every game outside of that road trip to Penn State. Now, they have a very tricky trip to Iowa and a trip to Washington, but it's just like list of questions are growing for this team. There's a lot of turnover. I'm not totally sold on the offensive line being, one of the top 5 in the country, maybe like they were at times last season. So I just think a lot of questions, take away another playmaker, young quarterback stepping in. It's another reason to think that Oregon will probably have trouble replicating last year's season.
They're not the only team that got some bad news, of course, and that is Penn State, Lasso.
Yeah, Max Granville was going to be a factor at defensive end for Penn State this year. Keep in mind, the reason why this is important, they are losing Abdul Carter. So they're already losing one player who was a major force for them. Granville, he He's been kind of on a fast track through high school recruiting and now to Penn State. I don't know if he was necessarily going to start, but he was going to play quite a bit of snaps. And Zariah Fisher, the projected starter at defensive end now, he missed all last season due to injury. So we know Dennis Sutton on one side is pretty good. I think the question here is attrition, loss of a guy who's going to play a lot of snaps, and how does maybe Jim Knowles kind of offset that with some different stuff. So just something to watch, taking away, I think, a pretty key piece of a defensive front for Penn State.
It's not good. June 10th, we're already starting to like track injuries for the season. That's a bad sign for 2025 football, for the vibe check.
Yeah. Also 2 Big Ten injuries, kind of random to.
Well, that part's totally random because like Penn State and Happy Valley and Outson, real close.
Right.
Real close.
Also play a pretty important game early in the season too.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. I forgot how early that game is. I'm not yet there yet, Stephen, on like trying to track where every single game is on the schedule. Like I know that teams are playing, and I haven't really gotten around to like, week 3 is going to be enormous, even though we did that exercise in the road trip.
You've already forgotten your road trip?
No, I've got the spreadsheet still. Okay. In fact, our dream road trip coming up in a couple of weeks. So get ready, everybody. Put together your road trips here and send them to us. All right. Anything else on the injury front you want to get to?
We should also note that Colorado head coach Deion Sanders is kind of away from the team right now. Sounds like he's dealing with some health issues. It does seem like he will be back at some point soon, but I think he's at his ranch, maybe in Texas right now. So not a lot of details, but I think USA Today broke the story earlier this week. So hope Coach Bryan gets back out there soon.
Yeah, no question about that. All right, you want to go? So here's what I wanted to do. I kind of want to do a draft here of coordinators. So we're going to look at some of the power coordinators, unless you want to talk about Matt Miller first. Taking over for Dirk Cutter at Boise State, because I find that one to be utterly fascinating because, you're losing Genty. You came off a playoff bid. There's a lot of expectation around this program to still be the G5 representative again next year. Now you got the new coordinator in there, so that's an interesting one. And so that's the kind of stuff I'm interested in, is the sort of the context of the situation. And the beauty's in the eye of the beholder here, Stephen. So you can literally pick anybody you want to, and you can say, this one is of most intrigue to me, most entertaining, most interesting, most important, most impactful. You can decide to define it however you want. But you get to draft one to talk about, and we'll go back and forth. But I'm taking the first pick.
All right. You won the coin flip. So
that's right. Here's what I want to, because I kind of want you to confirm I want some confirmation bias. Here's what I want.
Are you asking me to make you feel better today? Is that what this is all about? Kinda. Okay. All right.
I mean, I was on a practice field, so I feel pretty good.
You were.
I watched football happen, so I'm trying to cheer you up here. I think based on all of the context, based on the head coaching situation, based on how the previous coordinator was fired last year, based on what happened to the 5-star elite, superstar supposed quarterback last year, and how he's transferred to a conference rival who's going to play in your stadium this year, and you went and got a quarterback to go with your coordinator, and he's the youngest in all of college football. I don't know how Ben Arbuckle at Oklahoma, packaged with, in parentheses, plus John Mateer, I don't know how Ben Arbuckle is not the most interesting and important and fascinating coordinator hire in all of college football. The system is interesting. They like to take deep shots. They like to run the guy. Mateer's got all these interesting skills. He's coming with them. They're both Texas guys, Arbuckle and Mateer, so they're coming back to I think it's the most interesting hire of the offseason. It may not be the one that affects the national championship, but it seems like it affects a lot of things. Other teams in the SEC, Brent Venables' future at Oklahoma. I think it's the number one most interesting coordinator hire. Agree? Disagree?
He would be up there. I don't know that I would have him as my most interesting, but I do agree with you that just from a intrigue standpoint, I am just fascinated to see how this experiment works out. Because we have seen that when you try to make this, let's take a step back for a second. Oklahoma's offense basically bottomed out last year. Offensive line injuries, receiver injuries, sort of out of their control. Hiring Seth Luttrell as offensive coordinator didn't work out. So OC, quarterback, offensive line, receiver, tight end, all question marks for Oklahoma last year. I think the thing you have to like is this brings stability and it brings sort of a direction. And you can also hit the ground running because you have your quarterback coming with you. And we've seen other teams have success with this. Go get the OC, go bring the quarterback in. You're importing an offense from day one that can hit the ground running. So
the Vanderbilt model.
Yeah, adjusting to life in the SEC Washington State basically played a Mountain West schedule last year, is going to be a challenge. But I think, if anything, Oklahoma has a much better direction. They've got a quarterback, I think, that can hit the ground running. I like the move, and I just don't know. I don't know what the ceiling is for this move, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no clue what
Yeah.
the whole combination is going to be. No clue. And some of the struggle last year was like ineptitude, Seth Luttrell getting fired, and yo-yoing, I thought, too soon, Jackson Arnold in and out of the lineup. But also, like, just the whole receiving core and offensive line was like, in the hospital.
Right.
Not literally,
Right.
but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Just super banged up. So I don't know. That's my number one pick. All right. So if they're not the most interesting to you, I want to know who is.
It's got to be Jim Knowles for me at Penn State. I love what Penn State has done this offseason with roster retention over on the offensive side of the ball. This was also, it's not only Penn State has been very good on defense. I mean, Manny Diaz to Tom Allen. I think Jim Knowles is better than both of them. So their defense was already great. It's going to be even better under Jim Knowles. We mentioned the injuries he's going to have to overcome, losing Abdul Carter, some depth issues up front. But also, I think what it's interesting to me is, like, this is Penn State's attempt to do two things. They just went and stole. I know maybe the breakup was a little messy between Knowles and Ohio State, but they just hurt their rival. They just took Ohio State's defensive coordinator. And I think it's also an attempt for Penn State to go from good to be national championship great. And I think that's where what a coordinator like Knowles can have an impact, like Coltonecki did on the offense last year. So fascinating to see how it works. I think it's a great move for Penn State.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're all in, right? Like, they're
Yeah.
all in on this, and to be able to hurt the team that you're literally and figuratively chasing all the time, on top of the fact that they've got to replace all their offensive staff as well, or half their offensive staff too, in terms of breaking in new coordinators. I know it's Ryan Day's offense for by and large. Is Jim Knowles the best defensive coordinator in college football? Is he worth $3 million? I don't know. But it doesn't matter, because you took him from your arch rival, and he is probably an improvement on Tom Allen, who also is on this list, by the way.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what it meant. The defense has never been Penn State's problem. That's the thing. I'm with you. I think Coltonecki's great. I think he'll figure it out. Drew Aller, 3 years, better receiving talent on that offense. I think I left that one for you because I don't think James Franklin's he's not in danger of getting fired.
Yeah.
But to your point, the level of pressure around Franklin, and then subsequently because of that Jim Knowles, because of the headlines, because of how he left Ohio State, and because of the money, they got to go win now. Penn State's got to win now.
It's like trying to be better at the margins, essentially.
Yeah.
Like if your defense was number 10 last year, just trying to be number 3 could help Penn State be a national championship caliber team. So love the move. A lot of intrigue as well for me.
All right. I'm trying to go off the board. Okay. Because I'm trying here. My next pick, Gus Malzahn at Florida State. So the truth of the matter is there's no way that Florida State is going to be 13-0 and be that good. There's also no way that they're a 2-10 football team. So what is the impact of Gus Malzahn? So first of all, I think he is a total stabilizing force for the offense. They will finally have an identity. They should be physical and be able to run the football. He is going to cull the herd, for lack of a better term, because you cannot run Gus Malzahn's system with a bunch of players who might be considered, I'm going to call them portal soft. like guys that are a little more finesse that just kind of come in for a paycheck. I don't know if that's what Florida State has or not, but I know that they're going to have a bit more of an identity on offense, and I know it will be around the running the football. Gus Malzahn might be a better head coach than Mike Norvell. I don't know. And I mean, probably not. It's a joke, but tongue in cheek. But the guy's been to a national championship game. Mike Norvell has not. And he's a better head coach than a lot of head coaches in college football. So I am utterly fascinated with how we are going to evaluate Mike Norvell at the end of the year based on his roster and program strategy, and bringing in a veteran, very established, kind of proven coordinator to run one half of your team, I think is a really smart move. But man, I could see if the offense is great and the defense is just as bad as it was last year, it's going to be really interesting to see the dynamics at play in Tallahassee. So Gus Malzahn is my number 2 pick.
It's interesting because obviously Malzahn and Norvell go back a long ways. It's kind of a mentor for Norvell. Also, Malzahn didn't work out as the head coach at UCF. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of his offense. I think it's gone maybe a little bit stale. At the same time, they were 13th in the country in offensive success rate last year. And it's also interesting because this is a completely, I think it's a good move for Norvell, but also compare that to what Brent Venables is doing. He's taking over the defensive play calling duties. So Norvell has called the plays, and it's probably a make or break season for Norvell. He's also handing it off to Malzahn. So I find the decision making with your back against the wall in a critical season to be really interesting. I think the floor in this move seems pretty high, especially when they brought in Thomas Castellanos. Like that, he was at UCF before, just seems like a good fit for Florida State's offense. So I think the floor is a lot better. I think also, to your point, you mentioned something about effort, playing hard. I don't think that'll be a problem under Gus Malzahn, right. And throw in defensive coordinator Tony White too.
Yep, exactly. All right, with your second pick of the draft,
I am staying at offensive coordinator. I'm going to go with Ryan Grubb at Alabama.
Ooh, that counts. Okay.
I think just here's why this move interests me is, first of all, Nick Sheridan, I think, was fine. I think they can get a lot better, but it's getting the band back together. It's Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb. This pairing works so well at Washington, taking Michael Penix in that Washington offense to an appearance in the national championship game. Getting one of your top lieutenants, a trusted voice back on offense in a year where you have a first-time starter at quarterback, whether it's Simpson, Russell, Mack. I love the move for Alabama. I think Alabama's offense got a lot better with Ryan Grubb coming back to call plays. He had a cup of coffee there when DeBoer was hired, went to Seattle, got fired. Now he's back at Alabama. Good move for the Tide.
I'm going to say something. I'm going to workshop something all summer. And I don't even know if I believe it yet, but I want to see your reaction. Is it possible that Auburn is as close to the playoff as Alabama?
That's a pretty bold take there. Close.
Iron Bowl is in Auburn this year.
Also hosts Georgia. I mean,
this is the beginning. This is like a very pre-baked theory and concept here. Because I'm very pro Alabama. I like the Ryan Grubb hire. I like getting the two of them together. They're much better together. I think Ty Simpson opens up more of the playbook. I think the offensive line and the running game all could be better than it was last year.
So what's the argument for Auburn to make the playoff? Just they have a favorable schedule. You think year 3.
They get Alabama at home, and that game could decide between 9-3 and 10-2 for both of them. And Auburn can win no matter how bad Auburn is and no matter how good Alabama is. Auburn can win that game. You know what I mean? Like you host the Iron Bowl, you can win it. Doesn't matter where you are in the season. So if they're both 9-2 going into that game, you got to pick Auburn.
I mean, if
I told you this was I told you it was half baked.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. This is is your hand on the burner over there, or
no? It's just a little. You know how you get like some vibes and some, you just start to think stuff, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna workshop this with Steven on the pod.
I think you were out in the sun too long at Titans practice.
Maybe. All right, I'm gonna go way off the board here, and maybe I should wait to draft this one later. But I'm gonna go way off the board because I want to hear you talk about it for a second. I'm gonna go Oklahoma State, and I'm gonna take both of them. because Doug Meacham takes over for Casey Dunn, and Brian Nord is out for the great Todd Grantham, who is just still employable apparently. Doug Meacham, of course, was at TCU for the last 4 seasons, a big part of their championship run. He was the OC in 2021. He's kind of gone up and down and back and forth, and Kansas and Houston and TCU, and I don't really know how, it's still kind of Gundy's offense, and he's still the one kind of just developing the quarterbacks here. But Todd Grantham, that's who Mike Gundy is trying to save his career with, Todd Grantham. So after an offer in the conference, you changed both coordinators and neither of which is very inspiring. I am utterly fascinated with what's going to happen in Stillwater.
Same here. I'll be honest, like both of these coordinator hires, not exactly like you said, inspiring. There is also an element of maybe they're not inspiring, but they also raise the floor quite a bit. And also, Gundy has this track record of trying to find hidden gems at coordinator, and he did that with Mike Yursich a few years ago.
This
You
is
know,
the opposite of that.
right? He was like scrolling on the internet, looking at stats. Always a little dangerous when Gundy gets on the internet these days, but he did at least raise the floor by bringing in two veterans. I'm not necessarily a fan of either one of them, but also if they do raise the floor with all the personnel changes, it's a completely different roster, completely different team. Also, there's also this thing in my mind about Oklahoma State that I don't want to doubt Gundy, but I'm also looking at the roster and how bad they were last year and going,
Yeah.
I don't know. So yeah,
Todd
I
Grantham? Todd Grantham? What are we doing?
yeah.
We're just going to third and Grantham.
I was gonna say, how many big plays is this defense gonna give up this year?
Dude, just wait for 3rd and 9 to throw the ball. Just throw the ball on 3rd and 9. He'll blitz you, and you'll pick it up, and you'll score points.
Well,
Fine.
if you're on the hot seat, I guess, and you're gonna go down losing, you might as well go down, send the house blitz on 3rd and 9 and get beat for a big play, I guess.
Dude, do you remember the Mike Valenti rant about Michigan State?
Yes. Oh man, that is
back-to-back 0 blitzes in a monsoon.
It's been ages since I heard that one. That's classic.
I'd rather have Teddy Ruxpin and HR puffing stuff in the booth. I didn't realize I was going to go back-to-back Oklahoma, or both go back to the state. So, all right, where are you going next?
All right, I'm going to go with a name that's maybe a little bit off the board, but also I think a name that you and I are both going to like. I'm going to take Jason Beck, the offensive coordinator at Utah. He's actually a former BYU quarterback, now coaching.
I got it written down right there.
All right. See, we're on the same page. You know, he's been kind of a right-hand man for Bronco Mendenhall for a number of years. He's coached at BYU, Virginia, coached at New Mexico last year. But not only was his offense at New Mexico one of the better ones, they actually led the Mountain West in yards per play. He's also bringing his quarterback over, Devin Dampierre, coming over from New Mexico, very entrenched in this offense. So kind of the same setup here. Utah struggled a lot last year on offense, importing a new scheme, coordinator, and quarterback. They're all coming to Salt Lake City. Another reason why I think Utah is going to factor into the Big 12 title mix, and we might be too low on them. I'm just almost tempted to just say, in Kyle Whittingham, I trust. They're going to be good on defense. They should be much improved on offense.
I think the package deal works really well at a place like Utah.
Agreed.
For a number of reasons. Number one, I think the structure on defense and the stability on the coaching staff, I think, is a really beneficial thing to do, unlike the Oklahoma situation, where Venables is sort of like trying to save some things. And this is different. This is like Whittingham can retire whenever he wants to, or he could just coach as long as he wants to. They're not going to fire him ever. So it's a very stable situation. You know the defense is going to be great. You can be a little bit more risky on offense when you have that kind of arrangement. On top of that, the Big 12, as we've discussed 4 years now, every weekend is a winnable game. And because that means you're not going to face a bunch of elite top 5, top 10, 5-star rosters, you're more likely to be productive with a package deal like that.
Agree.
So I'm with you. Here's what's interesting. I did not have Ryan. I wrote down about 18 names here, and I did not write down Ryan Grubb. And I did write down Jason Beck.
I'm surprised you didn't have Ryan Grubb on your list. Honestly, I thought you would. So
it's just, I mean, it's interesting, but it's still Kalen DeBoer's offense. It's still, I don't know, like the rest of the staff is still there. It feels like I don't know. Does that make it's just not as interesting to me? But I get why it's of course interesting.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna go. Oh, I got 3 or 4 here. I'm gonna go Chip Lindsey at Michigan, because I think it's not because Sharon Moore is like on the hot seat. It's because, again, the context of the situation is utterly fascinating to me. You have a huge game early. You got a big game against Nebraska early. You have a team that thinks it could bounce back and rebound and contend for a playoff spot this year. everything around the quarterback looks like it could be playoff good at Michigan. They proved some stuff down the stretch last year. They still need to do more of that, but it's all about how fast do you get Bryce Underwood healthy or prepared and ready to go. And if your job as the coordinator is to maximize his talent, how fast does that happen? And if it happens quickly, then Michigan could be a really dangerous football team. If it does not, and we've seen a lot of these guys, Jackson Arnold, Connor Wigman, Nico, like all these guys struggled to kind of get up to speed. If that happens, Michigan's not a playoff team, and probably the blame falls on Chip Lindsey. And so I don't know. I think it's really, really interesting because of the arrangement in Ann Arbor is very different. And who knows who's the head coach in some of these games because of the pending, appeal and suspension.
I think it's interesting just because he's basically tasked with developing Bryce Underwood. Like that is his, goal is they have Bryce Underwood, ultra talented 5-star quarterback, capable of taking the reins and developing into a superstar. And it's Lindsey's job to do that and do that quickly. I also think, to your point, Michigan has a pretty solid foundation. I think their offensive line will be better. Not sure about the receivers. Their running backs are going to be good. When Chip Lindsey was hired at North Carolina when Drake May was still there, Mac Brown, one of the things he brought him in for was to develop May and help him get to the next level of the NFL. So I think there's a little bit of a track record there. He's produced pretty successful offenses. Other coaches seem to be pretty high on his ability to develop quarterbacks. So given the situation, it is very intriguing for Michigan.
It's just fascinating because I think he's coached either the high school or the college level in almost like every SEC state. Like he's coached in Georgia. He's from Alabama. He coached in Alabama. He coached in Texas. He coached in Mississippi. He actually coached out at Arizona State for a year. He was the head coach at Troy, of course, where he won 5 games every year. So maybe Michigan's just guaranteed to win 5 games in the Big Ten every year. This is the first time he's coached north of the Mason-Dixon line. He was responsible for Drake May, as you mentioned. This is the first time he's been in the north, above the wall, but beyond the wall. So we'll see. We'll see what it's. I just think it's really interesting. It's a very interesting situation, and you've got an elite recruit with a roster that could be pretty good, and this is who's you've chosen, and those are the things that I find interesting.
Yeah, I think I will be curious. I'm guessing Sharon Moore is going to hand him the play calling duties, but how much of that? How big of a role does Moore play in the offense? And I think we've seen, there's, as we're talking about these coaches, it's interesting to see which ones are taking more control or giving it up. And of course, each situation is different. I'm going to go over to the defensive side, Braden. Going to talk about my guy, Shield Wood, over at Texas Tech. So one of the funniest comments that we saw in the coaches, anonymous coach scouting in our magazine was, can Shield Wood come in and flip the defense with all that free agency spending? They were a classic Texas Tech defense last year, and that's not a compliment. So Shield Wood has been around for a while. He's coached at Army, he's coached at Tulane, and of course he was the defensive coordinator at Houston last year. Defense was not Houston's problem. They were 4th in the Big 12 in fewest points allowed per game. They were a good defense. Texas Tech's personnel is better. They have a good coordinator now. I am just fascinated to see if he can turn this around and what's the level of improvement, because small improvement, Texas Tech doesn't win the Big 12. If they're significantly better, that might be enough to get them to the Big 12 championship game. But the personnel, the pieces, it's all there. It's up to Shield Wood to transform what has been a long-running issue for Texas Tech.
Yeah, fascinating. You've been talking about him a long time. Like you mentioned him right away. And again, this is less there's different reasons for different coaches to be very interesting and different decisions. This is one where it's like, no, we're all in on this particular team this year at Texas Tech. We're pushing the chips to the table, but we think this guy's a part of it. And that's really interesting. It's not the same as a coach trying to save his career. It's not the same as a coach trying to reestablish some identity on offense like Gus Malzahn. It's not Mike Gundy. It's not Jim Knowles trying to win a championship. This is sort of like we're trying to accomplish something we've never done before, and we're all in. Come along with the ride, but you better do your job. So I just find this one to be. I'm with you. I've got him written down as well. I'm going to do the same thing around my team. Same exact. Do you know where I'm going here? Same thing, same guy, same position, same year, same kind of evaluation of the team with same level of expectation. Out of nowhere, competes for a conference title. I'm going Blake Gideon, Georgia Tech. So this is a guy 50-plus games in college football as a safety. I love safeties. It's like catchers that turn into managers in baseball. Like I just like guys that see the whole game. Safeties by definition have to see the whole game. So he's played a ton of football. He's coached at Ole Miss and Houston and Georgia State. He's kind of worked his way up, goes back to his alma mater, coaches the secondary. Really impressive job with that group. Now he's at Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech has a chance to be great this year. I think I really like this Georgia Tech team. I have to talk about them every episode. I'm contractually obligated, and a lot of glowing reviews in the anonymous scouting reports about hiring Blake Gideon. Like, this was a coup that Georgia Tech went and got this guy, and it feels like they're getting a guy early. They went and got him early, and that he is going to be a name that is like his next step after 2 years at Georgia Tech is like Alabama. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he goes somewhere real big if he's good next time, if over the next couple of years. Blake Gideon, keep an eye on him because Georgia Tech physical identity, and if the defense is as good as their offensive line is, Georgia Tech's going to be real tough to beat this year.
Yeah, I like this hire for Georgia Tech. I mean, it's a little bit risky in the sense of he's a first-time play caller taking over us at a spot where they were better on defense last year under Tyler Santucci, and he went to the NFL. I thought he did a nice job in one season there. So I think the question is, can he build on that? Can he continue to get this defense back on track? And I think he can. And I think to your point, they're getting him kind of before the rise. There's a chance that he goes to Georgia Tech and shines and moves on to a bigger job. But I think since Brent Key has taken over, hiring Buster Faulkner, hiring Tyler Santucci, I think he knows how to hire good assistants and good coordinators. So a little bit of unknown as a first time play caller, but I like the upside here.
It feels very similar to Sheil Wood, like
Mm-hmm.
kind of working. You've gone through now Wood, I think, is a couple years older and has coached a little bit longer, but like basically they're kind of doing the same thing here. They're progressing at the pretty natural stages. They've gone up in rank, and now they're getting sort of a big-ish break. Although I get, coaching under Willie Fritz is, pretty good. It's a pretty good place to learn. But now he's at a higher expectation level. Same thing with Gideon on calling plays. I just think those two programs, I have a feeling like your Red Raiders and my Jackets are going to be kind of in the same conversation each week on the show.
They need to
That's how
play
it
in a bowl
feels.
game this year. Yeah. We need to
A
get them.
playoff
Oh,
game.
there you
Yeah.
go. Yeah, we could have them play in
Yeah.
Lubbock for the first round. That'd be a fun first round matchup. But
All right, let's go rapid fire here.
I'll tell you, I'll throw out one real quick and then I'll throw it back to you. But I was going to throw out Corey Heatherman at Miami.
Yep.
I just think pressure, expectations, the defense was too much talent, not enough production last year. Minnesota's defense fourth in the Big Ten in fewest points per game last year. I think he's a really important, but also an upside play for Miami.
We did not mention Tom Allen at Clemson. That's going to be a really interesting one. That's a really good front seven at Clemson. They could be really dangerous, and if that group is elite, Clemson could be back top 5 in the country competing for a national championship. Holgo, which is not necessarily a totally new coordinator, but like Holgo counts at Nebraska because I think he's an upgrade over Satterfield, but also you just never know what's going to happen with Dana Holgorsen.
True.
What is Mike Shula doing in South Carolina?
Shane Beamer has had some weird coordinator hires to some extent, hasn't he?
Uh-huh.
Satterfield, Dow Loggins, and now Mike Shula. Now, to his credit, Dow Loggins worked out better than I think most of us anticipated later in the second year, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's true. How about NC State? Here's an observation for NC State. NC State, a lot of teams in the ACC changing both guys, Virginia Tech as well. But NC State changing both coordinators to me is here's my theory on this. I don't know if it has a ton of impact because Dave Doran's built such a consistent program. Like it is a top-down sort of expectation and consistency there. So certainly, and I don't mean to say that it doesn't matter. It does. But I also think that it will affect their upside this year because they're continuing to break in new people. But it feels like they've just kind of churned coordinators, and everywhere they go, especially on offense, obviously. But that it's not. This is a program that's pretty stable. It's a pretty stable program and doesn't get affected by this stuff as much. But it also keeps it from having that breakout year as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Well, because Kurt Roper and DJ Elliott now they're coordinators. Those guys have been around for a while. I think that's the probably the best way to kind of look at this is experience. The
High
floor is,
floor, low ceiling.
yeah, I don't really see a ton of upside here, but it also feels like for a program that's pretty stable, probably not the worst hires for Dave
Yeah.
Dorn.
Who do you like best on offense? USC, UCLA, or Washington? New hires.
Offense, I mean, basically Lincoln Riley would still be the play caller for USC, right? So yeah, probably
Sure.
yeah, pick them. But
Well, no. Which hire do you like the best? Is what I'm talking about.
Tino Sinceri's pretty interesting though. At UCLA, he actually I think got ties back to Deshaun Foster when he was with the Carolina Panthers,
Yep.
also coming over from Indiana, where kind of taking a chunk of that offense off. So I would suspect that at USC and Washington, the play callers would remain the head coaches. So I guess to answer your
Sure.
question, I would probably just take Sinceri because it's something different and an improvement over Eric Bieniemy.
Fair enough. Fair enough. How about Jeff Grimes? The domino effect of Jeff Grimes is really interesting. But Jeff Grimes going and taking over for Phil Longo in Wisconsin feels like this is a pretty important year for Luke Fickell in Wisconsin. And Grimes is going to bring something different than Phil Longo does. And what is Wisconsin's identity? Are they going to get back to something that's a little bit more familiar? I don't know, but that's a really interesting hire as well, and a very critical one for Luke Fickell.
It feels like this is Wisconsin getting back to its roots, essentially. It feels like Phil Longo's offenses were productive at times. They also, I don't, that there something was missing there. And so I think with Grimes, maybe he didn't work out as great as we thought at Kansas, but going back to BYU, he's produced some pretty successful offenses. But I think this is an
Yep.
attempt to run the ball, be a little more
Yep.
physical, get away
Yep.
from some of that other stuff they were doing under Longo.
There you have it. And make sure you check out Athlon Sports Magazine. Go ahead and buy one of those, and you'll get all of the coordinator carousel changes all written down there in the magazine from Stephen Lassen. So make sure you check that out. I'm sure you'll have like grading the coordinator's first 3 years coming up on the website, right?
I'm going to probably rank the coordinator hires, but I could do that. Although, given the sheer amount of coaching changes, that might get a little difficult.
Here's the one I want. I want to know, like, I always am familiar. I always remember Lincoln Riley taking the job at Oklahoma. We think it was East Carolina, right? He was at East Carolina, the offensive coordinator. He takes the job at Oklahoma, and the way the industry reacted to him was as if he was already a proven commodity. And what I want, and this is sort of what makes Shieldwood and sort of Blake Gideon, these guys really interesting. I want to know who the next like 4 or 5 offensive coordinators and 4 or 5 defensive coordinators are that were Lincoln Riley when he was hired at Oklahoma as the coordinator, not the head coach, but the coordinator. I don't want to know. I want to know who's in that group.
Yeah,
So that's the piece I want to see on athlonsports.com.
Didn't mention him, but I tell you a guy who will be in there. And here's a little nugget, a little going deep dive. How about Skylar Cassidy, the new defensive coordinator at North Texas.
That is a deep dive. I love that.
He was the defensive coordinator on Sam Houston's defense last year. That was very, very good. And he's kind of bounced around a bit. He was at Auburn, Texas Tech, kind of in the background. Now he's defensive coordinator at North Texas. I think it's a really smart hire.
North Texas, dominant defense entering the chat. I like it. All right, Stephen, where can people find you?
You can find me everywhere on the internet, as Braden always says, and you can read my work at athlonsports.com.
That's right. Get to me there as well. Otherwise, go buy a magazine, everybody. Come on. They're perfect. They're awesome. They're amazing. They're wonderful, and everybody's talking about them. For Stephen, I am Braden. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next week.